Okay. Hi, everybody. Susan here. I'm here with Ethan Nichtern, who I don't know if you can see him. Oh, yeah, there he is. And we welcome you to this short, but hopefully potent gathering to talk about how to enter 2017 with peace, power, and community. So we will just hang out here for a minute or so because it's just straight up the top of the hour and wait for people to join because it really is not even 12:01. So we'll be patient. And for those of you who are here, hi, thank you for being right on time. I want to welcome you. I'm going to introduce you to Ethan. I'm sure many of you know him, but for those of you who don't, in a moment. Ethan and I have some things to say, and we're happy to say them, and we'll meditate together. But the reason that we wanted to do this was to give us, ourselves and you, some insight and some tools and some mostly togetherness to enter this year. It's a fraught time. It's been very painful and difficult for many of us. And the main impetus behind this is you are not in this by yourself. I mean, in one sense, we are all in it by ourselves, but in another sense, there are countless people who feel as you do and want to take a stand with you to fight what we know is wrong. So we're going to start in a moment. There are already close to 50 of us here, so that's great. It's a big number it's wonderful. The main thing is for us to interact with you. So we're going to say some things. We'll have a meditation together, as I say, and then you will have a chance to share your reflections, ask questions, pose whatever you want to pose. And here's how you do that. If you scroll down to the bottom of this page, you'll see a comments box. Put your comments in there. Don't hesitate. Sooner rather than later, put your questions in there. And then after you post the comment, you will have to hit refresh on this page to get back to the live stream. So I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I'm looking around just to make sure all the technical things are cool, and so they appear to be. So let's start. So my name is Susan Piver. I'm very happy that you are here for this gathering that is called Peace, Power, and Community in 2017. And each of those words is important. We all want peace, of course. We all want the power to fight what we know is wrong. Very interesting proposition to embrace that power. And we want to be part of a community of people who have no question about the necessity to take a discerning and intelligent stand against intolerance and racism and anti-Semitism and misogyny and stupidity of all kinds. No question there. We're not going to give this one a chance. We're not going to make this the new normal. We have to do something. But interestingly, it seems that what we do, I'll give myself as an example, I often find that what I do adds to the aggression. So the key question here is, how do we fight without aggression? And we'll come back to that at the end. But first, let me introduce you to Ethan. For those of you who don't know him, I'll put him on screen right now. Hi, Ethan.
Hi, Susan.
Hi.
Great to be here.
Great that you are here, and great that we're here together. So Ethan is a senior teacher in the Shambhala Buddhist lineage. We are practitioners together. He is a teacher in many ways. He started the Interdependence Project maybe 6 or 7 years ago, which is very cutting edge, novel, just outreach to the community of people who want to practice the Dharma in their own Dharma without having to go through, without having to become Buddhist, but just making the Dharma available without compromise. And he also is the author of the wonderful book, The Road Home, which is recently out in paperback. And the very end of that book focuses on social engagement and the Dharma. So please read that if you want to learn more about that. And he has a new book coming out probably next year. What is it called?
It's called The Dharma of the Princess Bride. What the coolest fairy tale of our time can teach us about Buddhism and relationships. So it's part memoir, part homage to pop culture, part sort of Dharma book about friendship, family, and romance in 3 sections. And yeah, it was obviously, it's a little bit whimsical, a little bit poignant, obviously conceptualized before the events of November 2016, but hopefully will still be relevant to the interpersonal level of the path, which is, in my way of looking at this, the path unfolds on 3 levels simultaneously: personal, interpersonal, and collective. And I think a lot of us are feeling that we've sort of forsaken the more collective aspect of that path, or haven't known how to engage, or have seen people engage in it in ways that felt unskillful. And so we're really trying to figure out how to really make the collective part of our path, part of our journey, but the personal and the interpersonal are still there. So my next book really hopefully focuses on the interpersonal level in an interesting way. So hopefully that will still be relevant in 2017, having good family and friendship relationships.
I have a feeling it will be. So one of the things after the events of November 2016, where our country seemed to have been stolen, felt like to me, it was a shock. And don't have to explain that to you. You're here because you felt that too. But shortly after, in the wake of the presidential election, I started to notice Ethan posting many powerful, interesting, inspiring, challenging, uncompromising things about fighting. And at one point I was posting what I thought might be helpful, ways to deal with the heartbreak, the shock, what it means to stand up for what you believe in without crushing the other person. And we both, at one point, I think, Ethan, you messaged me saying, why aren't more Buddhist teachers talking about this? And there are other teachers that are talking about this. Certainly we're not the only ones. But I think in part because of our training as in the Shambhala Buddhist lineage, which has a very unusual and potent and powerful focus on creating enlightened society, and maybe just because of the kind of people we are, we wanted to step right into the fray and try to do something that was helpful. So I'll just share with you a little story, and then I'll turn it over to Ethan to share his thoughts and reflections on how and why he is doing what he's doing in the wake of the situation. So on November 8th, nobody got any sleep. And on November 9th, I was scheduled to give a talk in Washington, D.C. to Tara Brock's community. Tara Brock is a wonderful Vipassana teacher. She has a very big community in the DC area. And every Wednesday, her community gathers to hear a talk from her. And between 200 and 300 people show up. It's a very committed community. And long ago, probably 8 or 9 months ago, she had asked me if I would substitute for her on this particular day because she was going to be on retreat with her husband. I said, sure. I don't think either of us thought, oh, that's the day after the election. I wonder if that's going to, have any impact. And of course, it did. So it was one of the most intense teaching experiences of my life. I walked in there thinking, what am I going to say? What am I going to say? First of all, maybe no one will be there because the main teacher's not there, or maybe a lot of people will be there because they need each other. And it turned out the latter. Many people were there because we needed each other.
Susan Piver may have had something to do with it too.
Well, Well, stranger things could have happened. I don't know. But and it's in a church, and so it's like people are sitting up here and they're sitting all around like in a U shape. So everywhere I look, there's people, and teacher sits on this little tiny seat. And I just remember walking up to that seat, thinking, "What am I going to say?" And I felt that all like 200 plus people were looking at me like, help us. So the best I could do was to offer a loving kindness meditation practice for the United States of America, where we started with ourselves, loving kindness for ourselves as people who are heartbroken, loving kindness for people we love who also are heartbroken, loving kindness for people we don't know who are heartbroken, loving kindness for people who are not heartbroken because they feel exactly the opposite as we do. And then loving kindness for all Americans who long to feel at home in their country. And at that last point, may all beings feel at home in their country, as we were sort of practicing that together. I started to cry, and others started also. There was this deep wellspring of emotion and love, I would say. And that gave me a lot of hope. It gave me a lot of hope. What I want to share with you about that mainly, and then I'll turn it over to Ethan, is that nobody has to agree with anyone in order to practice loving kindness. You don't have to like anyone. You certainly don't have to forgive anyone. Loving kindness is not synonymous with being nice, as we do it being cuddly and snuggly. Sometimes it might, but you don't have to like anyone. But if you somehow find it in yourself to imagine that person also longs for what I long for, even though their way of going about it is completely different, introduces a teeny tiny bit, perhaps, of space, so that you're not just me or you. It's us. That shift has tremendous consequences. So I just wanted to share that with you. It was a very powerful teaching moment for me, and I never felt the truth and power of loving kindness as a form of fierceness any more intensely than I did in that moment. So, Ethan, how about you? What was your, how's it you?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people who feel like they've been put into an alternate universe.
Right.
And interestingly enough, that's how I feel. In fact, this whole narrative actually comes from an alternate universe narrative. I don't know if people are familiar with Back to the Future Part 2, where they go back to the present and the present has changed, and Biff Tannen now runs a casino and is a billionaire and has destroyed the entire town of Hill Valley, I think is the town in California. So that they've talked to the screenwriter of Back to the Future 2, and in 1989, Biff Tannen was directly based on Donald Trump. And that's exactly how November 9th felt, like all of a sudden been transported into an alternate present moment. So it's interesting sort of how unpredictable this was, and yet how predicted this was at the same time when you go back in time. I had to do an appearance in the Columbus Circle subway station because CBS News wanted me to talk about meditation on the subway. And so that morning I had to go to Columbus Circle, which is right under Trump Tower, and tried to talk about being compassionate and aware when you're riding the subway. So that was an interesting experience. It's been hard, and it's also been a time to really realize that Buddhism and these mindfulness teachings in a democratic society are very new. They really didn't develop in a democratic worldview. The democratic worldview is only really a few hundred years old. And it requires so much of citizens participating in democracy. It requires a sense of people who want to work together, who want to have their own views, who want to debate, who want to converse with the best of intentions about what's best for individuals, what's best for community, what's best for society. It requires a lot of honesty. It requires tremendous compassion, right speech, tremendous engagement. And I have just realized that so many of the ways that over the last 30 years that whatever we were trying to apply about some kind of Buddhist view or framework, like equanimity or not taking sides or seeing all perspectives, when it was actually applied to the way that American democracy, and I think in other countries this is true as well, but how it's actually functioned, the Buddhist teachings would almost always be applied in a way that helped the status quo or helped the conservative viewpoint, right? So if one person is lying with bad intentions and the other person is telling the truth and listening, and we are taking a view that says the middle path should acknowledge both of those perspectives, you're going to end up with some version of Buddhism that says, well, we should lie half the time and be pretty aggressive, right? And we should acknowledge the liar. You know, we should include them. We should see their point of view. And if somebody's lying with bad intentions, that has nothing to do with the middle path. That is just call that out every time. Abandon that behavior is what Buddhism would actually say. So there was sort of a, you know, one of the things that people have been noticing about the media is that, especially television media, but other forms of media too, engages in something called false equivalence all the time, which is there's an actual fact that's available, and rather than talking about what the facts are, you just invite two opposing opinions to say what they think the fact might be, and that's not really reality. That's not really mindfulness. And so when you apply that same perspective of non-duality from Buddhism, you actually just end up treating negative intentions and confusion and manipulation as a valid perspective. And Buddhism does not take that view. It takes the view that those ways of looking at the world should be called out and abandoned, not reacted upon with violence, but also not validated. And so just been thinking about how much democracy requires of mindfulness practitioners. And it goes far beyond, I think the other thing that I've noticed in the last 10 years, and I've noticed this in myself, is that, you know, you sort of have these different niche interests. Like, I don't know, Susan, do you like anime movies?
No.
Right. So some people do. I like certain movies like Miyazaki, great anime, and I love Pixar movies like Ratatouille. So I would say overall I'm a fan of anime movies. But that is considered like a niche interest, right? That some people can be interested in, right? And that's totally true. Like, we could live in a society and I like anime movies, you don't like anime movies. Cool. Guess what? Politics is also treated like a niche interest, where some people have been allowed to say, I'm way into it, I follow it. Other people say, I'm not into it at all. If that's true, if politics becomes a niche interest, democracy ceases to function. Politics has to be an interest of every citizen of a democracy. Otherwise, the democracy will fall apart. And I'm not sure if that's what just happened, but there was a big undercutting of democracy overall in what just happened. And hopefully, I think we can recover, because we can always start again. That's a Buddhist principle. But we can't take the view, if we are going to say I'm a citizen in democracy, that I can or can't be interested in politics the way I can or can't be interested in animated movies. It's just we just shouldn't have that system then. We should have another system. And so I think that's really interesting to say. If we are going to live in a democratic country and be a mindfulness practitioner, we're going to have to really apply our practice to working with these things. It's not optional. The biggest political party in America is the 44% of people who just didn't or couldn't vote. You know, that's the interesting thing, is if you look at these numbers, about 25% of adults in the country just voted for Donald Trump, or whoever they thought he was. About 26.5% just voted for Hillary Clinton. So that's interesting that she's not the president. 4 or 5% voted for other people, and 44% either couldn't or chose not to vote. That's not going to work. That system, of course, that system's going to fall apart. If the person who got 25% of the vote, and they're not even the person who got the most support, is now the person with all the power, because a lot of us didn't engage the way we needed to, that's not going to work. And I've just seen that in myself, that if I'm engaging in those apathetic actions myself, or if I'm teaching meditation as a way that allows people to feel like they have a choice in that, the society I live in is not going to hold the Buddhist teachings anyway. So the whole thing feels pretty choiceless to me. At the same time as I still have been taking time since November to watch my animated movies or read a poem, hang out with friends, take care of my body. You know, I think we still really need to invest in personal practice right now. So those are some thoughts on my mind, that we don't have a choice and we have to do this. And the lucky thing is, I think Donald Trump, because he is, from a Buddhist standpoint, he is so personally traumatizing, and his personal demeanor is so rife with what in the Tibetan system we would call non-virtuous qualities. In other words, he is a celebration of non-virtue. And I'm not saying that as me, he's saying that as him. And that's not the way I felt about Republican presidents in the past. You know, the way I personally felt about George W. Bush is he was actually fairly virtuous in his personal life, and then he engaged in a lot of policies that were quite harmful. And now we have a person who I think is very activating to, like, how do we want to be in the world and what do we want to create in the world? And so I think a lot of us are starting to see that apathy is not a choice, and it never really was a valid choice. And so we're going to have to reframe, if we're meditators or if we're Buddhists or we're just interested in those teachings, we're going to have to now reframe these practices, not to have a structure that validates apathy and emptiness, a very nihilistic view of emptiness and non-duality and non-engagement, but we're going to have to look at the structure that emphasizes engagement, because otherwise we just won't have a human society by the time we get to 2100. I think it's as simple as that. We either engage or human society falls apart.
Yeah. Can you hear me, by the way?
I can.
Is there, I've been seeing complaints that there's an echo on my voice, and I'm wondering if there still is an echo.
I wasn't hearing an echo earlier, and I'm also not hearing one now.
Yeah, I wasn't either. I'm kind of hearing it now. So if someone would comment and just take a moment and say, is my audio okay or not, that'd be great, because I know it's irritating when there's an echo. No more echoes. Awesome, thank you. If anybody else is hearing differently, just let me know. So we were going to have a meditation, but I think we're going to skip that, because I think there's already comments and people want to say things. So I hear an echo on myself, but I'm going to try to ignore that. Still an echo. Mute yourself. I am muted. Sorry, give me 1 second. Sorry for the technical difficulties. How do I mute myself? How do I mute myself?
I think if you just eliminate the volume on your own computer, maybe.
Can you hear me?
We can still hear you.
Okay,
So your mic is still working.
Okay, good. So hopefully that's better. I don't think it is. Sorry, you got. Try to bear with me. Yeah, still an echo. Well, if anybody knows how to fix this echo, please let me know. Bottom corner of Hangout, right or left? Sorry. Ethan?
Yes.
I'm going to turn it back over to you while I try to fix this. And what I was going to talk about that I'd love for you to address is we all have to take a stand. Absolutely. But often when we do, it exacerbates the situation. So what is your suggestion? How do you do it? And what do you suggest to others?
Right. Well, there's a lot here, I think. So it exacerbates the situation. I think the interesting thing about having any form of political views that are considered progressive or more interdependent is there's often a real consciousness and wariness to feedback. And I find that same sort of wariness of getting feedback or hurting someone's feelings is also held by, spiritual people, meditators, Buddhists. So it's sort of like a progressive meditator is going to be really sensitive to people saying, "Oh, that was wrong. You took a stand here and you hurt somebody or you hurt something." And I find that's kind of interesting because, the thing that I've been thinking of recently is that speech, when it has good intentions, it's an act of mindfulness, and so is listening. So I think listening is always very important. For example, when I posted about this event on a Facebook group, somebody who was clearly a Trump supporter, if you went to their profile, which is cool, not cool. I mean, basically good, wrong choice. But that's up to them to say what they think about that. But they posted that the ACLU is an anti-Semitic organization. Now, has anyone listening to this ever heard that the ACLU is an anti-Semitic organization? And they posted an article reference. And so I listened. I said, oh, maybe I don't know as much about the ACLU as I thought. I'm pretty sure they're not anti-Semitic. I'm pretty sure they're anti anything that's anti. That's the whole point of the organization, since it's called the American Civil Liberties Union. But I investigated the article they posted. It was clearly a propaganda source, right? So I took the steps to listen. There wasn't anything else online that was referencing ACLU with any kind of anti-Semitic bent. Didn't make a lot of sense. So I listened. And so if that's an example of exacerbating the situation because one person said what you guys are doing is causing harm, I think we have to realize that the way speech works, especially among more conservative entities in our society, is speech is not always a well-intentioned listening and speaking. I think we should always engage with it and try to make it that way. But a lot of the time, speech is a tactic. Speech is a tactic. And it was very clear that this propaganda was to shut down an event to help people and try to support the ACLU, right? It was tactical. So I think we have to realize, as very sensitive, progressive, and spiritual people, which means sensitivity squared, that a lot of times we are going to receive negative feedback that's not actually directed at us. It's somebody's own hurt and anger that is enacted in a tactic to shut down whatever we're doing. And so I think that's important. But I also think that the important thing is, to get back to what I think you were talking about in terms of speaking more personally, is we have to recognize that these issues activate us. So we are going to feel sadness and fear and anger when you're looking at, like, how do I make sure Exxon doesn't destroy the planet? You know, which is actually what I think this election is actually about when you dig down under multiple layers. Since the Exxon CEO is trying to become the Secretary of State, it's kind of obvious that that's part of this. So how do I make sure that that doesn't happen? It's not that the Exxon CEO is basically bad. I just don't want the temperature to rise by 4 degrees Celsius so that my grandchildren cannot breathe. That's it. You know, there's a causality there. And so when I'm talking about this, I'm noticing myself right now getting activated. I just have to use my mindfulness practice to stay aware that I'm sad, that I'm afraid, that I'm angry. And when we get hooked by that, right, as somebody like yourself or somebody like Pema Chodron notes, the expression can move into an unskillful mode, right? But that doesn't mean you don't talk about Exxon. Right? We don't have a choice but to engage. So we have to make this our practice, you know? It's like the same way if you sit right after you just got dumped, right? Which I've done. You have to know that that's going to be a charged situation. There's going to be a lot of storyline, a lot of pain, a lot of physical discomfort, you know, a lot of maybe discursive thought, but you still do it because you know it's a good thing to do, right? So you have to know that when you're talking about issues where there might be a family member who watches a lot of Fox News, that's going to be tough. But you still do it because it needs to be done, and you bring your practice to it. And we have, the thing about meditators is I think we have the best tools. I think we get scared to use our own tools because conflict makes us feel like there's something wrong. But the founder of our tradition said, go towards the conflict, actually. Go towards the conflict without aggression. Chaos is extremely good news, right? He said all kinds of things that when you look at them, this is not a person looking for, let me hide in the one peaceful corner that remains. I don't really think there are that many peaceful corners remaining. So we have to work with these things in the battlefield, so to speak, which is why we're called warriors in the Shambhala tradition. I mean, I don't think that was like a cool little like superhero like title. I think he meant we're gonna have to be warriors without aggression.
Can you hear me, Ethan?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to say a few things, and I'm sorry for the echo, you guys, but maybe it's better. I don't know.
Just speak through it. You're clear
Okay.
to me, and I think people will still be able to hear you, even if it's slightly annoying. It's good to hear wisdom in a slightly annoying voice right now.
It does keep you awake. Thank you. So all of the things you're saying, Ethan, are extremely helpful and really good to hear that it's good to engage and that spiritual people actually engage. So the danger, I think, is when we engage from within what Buddhists call the three poisons.
Mm.
When we engage from grasping, I just want everything to be okay. I want someone to tell me it's going to be okay. You are bothering me so much right now. You are scaring me. I'm just going to shove you out of the way. Or only talk to people who agree with me.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the big problem online, I think. And we only talk to the people who already think the way we do. And then when things don't go our way, that really falls apart.
Mm.
See Pantsuit Nation. I make a practice of engaging with people who disagree with me, even though it's really exhausting. But I try to do it I'm trying to hone those chops because I'm going to need those chops. The second poison is called aggression, which we don't need an explanation of at this point. It's just, I don't like it, boom, you're out. I need to destroy you in order for my world to be okay.
Right.
I have to put you down. I have to kill you. It's not an exaggeration at this point. Very, very dangerous. And when you're activated and enraged, it takes a big person to not trip into their own aggression and mistake that for a good idea. There are a lot of people online who say, if you're not fighting, you're part of the problem. And on one level, I think that's true. But on another level, you're just as right to say, if you are fighting, you are the problem. Because how do you fight without aggression? That's the contemplation we both want to leave you with. It's a very important question for you to answer. We can't answer it for you. And the third poison is ignorance, which in this case would mean hiding. And of course, you know, we can't just shove our own faces in the shit, so to speak, 24/7. So you have to be kind to yourself and take breaks. And I don't even look at the news anymore. Figure something happens, I'll see it on Facebook or whatever. But there's a difference between modulating the input and just pretending that nothing is happening. Like, I'm just going to take care of my world, my life. Everything's cool right now with me. Other people will have to sort that out. As Ethan was pointing out, no longer an option. So check yourself when you want to respond, which you're here because you do, and we love you for it. Where is your grasping? Where is your aggression? And where is your ignorance? And this is where meditation comes in so handy, because the key to navigating the three poisons and then acting from what is left when the three poisons are gone, which according to my calculations is spaciousness and love. The first thing that you must do, and that sounds like a unilateral statement, but I think it's true, is slow the F down.
Right.
Which doesn't mean fall asleep. It just means feel. Also, like Ethan was saying, feel what you feel. Without the story.
Yeah.
Slow the whole thing down. Introduce some space. And then you can actually see what's around you. First, you have to see what's within you. Then you can see what's around you. Because when you don't see what's within you, you project it out into the environment. And all you see is your unfelt emotion. Dangerous. So meditation, mindfulness, as also Ethan was saying, is a requirement, I would say, because it enables you to slow down.
Right.
Which enables you to see, which enables you to act with discernment.
Yes.
So,
slow down. Slow down is always step one, always. And I agree with everything you said about seeing when our mind is caught in the three poisons. Here is the tricky, very subtle piece that I see on top of that is we're really going to have to know our own mind. We're really going to have to do what you said, because when defensiveness and manipulation comes in, one of the tactics is to make, and this is specifically applied towards progressive and spiritual people, is to make you feel, let's say, un-Buddhist, because I talk to a lot of people I disagree with online as well. And one of the tactical responses is they know that we want to not get caught in our own aggression. So if they can question like, ooh, that doesn't sound very Buddhist of you, something like that, it's going to try to strike at the place to get us to stop speaking up, to get us to stop fighting. And so I'm just saying, I agree with everything you're saying, but there are, when communication comes from good intention, and I do think that still happens. I don't think any of it still happens among the political parties, because that's not their view. I do not believe that the GOP is trying to, if the Democrats had a good idea, they would put that idea into they're not trying to debate from that sort of right speech standpoint, and maybe vice versa for the Democrats. I don't particularly align myself as a Democrat either.
Me neither.
But they, if there's a good intention to the speech, then listening and saying, oh, I'm going to use your idea. I'm going to absorb that. You have a good point there. But a lot of times the good intention is gone, and somebody will try to insert doubtful thoughts towards the spiritual person to get them to stop fighting. And so that's why we really have to know our own mind. Because if you get that reaction of like, as I get sometimes, how could a Buddhist teacher talk about the ACLU when it's an anti-Semitic organization? That's a tactical approach designed to get me to shut up. That's the point of that. It's not to get me thinking about stuff, you know? And so I have to really know my own mind and say, was that my intention? Was my intention to cause harm? Let me look at this further, right? So we really have to slow down and know our own minds, because some of the teachings that we have are known and can be manipulated, and will be accused of that. You know, it happens to me all the time.
Me too. I'm going to do an experiment, Ethan. I'm going to mute you while I'm talking and see if that helps. So, okay, you are now muted. So I don't know. I think that might have helped. Now I don't have anything to say, unfortunately. No, I think that was the problem. And thank you, Kelly, for pointing that out. And I think on the recording, you will not hear the echo. So apologies again. And if you want to hear, or you got irritated and you jumped out, understandable, but hopefully the recording will make it easier. We want to hear your questions. So please put them in comments. You scroll to the bottom of this page, and you can enter your comments in the post. I know there are already 55 comments. However, I think 35 of them are about the echo on my voice. So I'm going to read through them and share them with Ethan. And if I'm not having echo right now, please let me know, because that would make me feel better. So go down to the bottom, enter your question or your comment, post it, and then you'll have to hit refresh to restart the audio, the video stream. So that's cool. Okay, so Ethan, I'm going to read you the question because that is addressed to you from Beck, and then I'm going to unmute you to answer it. The question is, Ethan, in the example of the propaganda article, after finding out the source was fake, did you correct them? Did you then correct them, or did you leave it unresponded to? I find this is when things can start spiraling with trying to correct the false statements. Okay, let me unmute you. Hang on. Oopsie. I can't unmute you, sadly. Can you unmute yourself?
I think I'm unmuted.
Okay,
now.
good. I'll mute me.
Yeah, so actually my friend, I had checked it out, and then my friend had also responded to the post saying this is radical propaganda, and so I didn't have to respond. I think we have to really, again, this is where listening and speaking becomes really important, especially online, because like there's so little trusting expression between strangers that happens online. But I think you have to use your prajna, your discernment, and say, is this person trying to have a real conversation, a real democratic exchange between loving citizens, or are they trying to troll? You know, are they trying to stop a group of people from wanting to gather to do something beneficial because they have a different agenda? And I think you have to kind of give the benefit of the doubt and try a few things. But in that situation, I didn't particularly feel it was appropriate. I think I responded to him and said, well, I probably wouldn't, I wouldn't sign up for the event if I were you then. That's all I said. That's all I needed to say. So anyway, I think it's really about discernment. And I think sometimes it's good to have conversations. I think it's much easier to have conversations with people you disagree with in person than it is online. But occasionally they do happen. And You know, the other thing I've noticed about conservatives is, because I know a lot of them, is, and this is sort of psychologically demonstrated too, incredibly family oriented. So if you can't, if you keep talking about, you know, climate change and all they want to talk about is Hillary's emails or the furniture she stole from the White House, which is another thing on Fox News and Breitbart, just ask how their family's doing, and that might pop the. I mean, everybody likes to know how their family's doing. You could ask me how my family's doing. Everybody's quite well, thank you. But
That's awesome.
But I think you have to use your discernment, because sometimes it's good to respond, and sometimes you just get sucked down a rabbit hole when in that time you could have been working and you could have given $10 to the ACLU instead of getting into that with this person who's just trying to keep you busy, really. So I think trust yourself. And when you do what Susan said and slow down, it becomes easier to trust yourself.
Awesome. I'm going to mute you again. Did I do that? Okay. Those are fantastic suggestions. And I agree with everything you said. Sometimes there is nothing that you can say, but you can still make an aspiration in your heart for peace, for rapprochement, for all beings to be healed from their stupidity, including yourself. And that's not a small thing. So there's another question from Paul that kind of relates, and I'll try to address it. He says, I'm finding it very difficult to be skillful with people who feel strongly on both sides of the unfolding events. I am trying to stay in a state of, I don't know what will happen, which is true, now more than ever. How do I show compassion without getting caught in negative, aggressive talk? Well, that's an interesting question. And I think all you have to do to show compassion is not reject the people who are talking to you, not reject the people who feel strongly, not wish they were different, and have some sympathy and compassion for yourself for feeling so riled up and being the person who wants to wait and see in a particular way. So showing compassion is actually not necessary. Feeling compassion is. So it doesn't mean you have to say anything or do anything different, but when you make space in your heart by simply opening and listening and feeling what you feel in response to the person who's talking to you, even though it may be uncomfortable, but that also makes it possible for you to feel what they feel, which is what compassion is. It's feeling what the other person feels, not telling yourself, oh, that sounds hard, I feel sorry for you, but actually feeling in your own heart what that person feels. First, you have to, as we were saying earlier, feel what you feel, and then feel what they feel. You don't have to agree with it, you don't have to like it. But to show compassion, be compassionate, feel compassion, and you should be okay. So, Ethan, you can unmute yourself now if you want. I can't unmute you. I can only tell you to shut up. I can't unshut you up for some reason. And I'll look for more questions.
I agree with everything you said. I just want to. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I was waiting for the but.
Oh, there's no but. No,
Okay.
I just want to in the question, as I hear in a lot of questions, there's a sense of like, oh, this is really painful, and on both sides, people are angry, and I'm riled up, and it is really painful. But it's also not. We're not going to, by participating, screw everything up. I hear in a lot of these questions this sense of like, oh God, it's on all sides, and like, I might do something that's really, really harmful. And it's like, no, we're not. We're just going to listen and speak, and act. And hopefully that will be a benefit. It'll never be perfect. I've never engaged in a perfect action in my life, so I just, this path is made for people who want to get messy. And there's no way in this world all of us have blood and mud on our hands right now. So let's not try to figure out how to stay clean. Let's try to figure out how to add as little blood and mud as possible. But if we're trying to figure out how to sanitize the path, you know, and transcend the experience, I've often been thinking recently, Susan, that Buddhist meditation should be called non-transcendental meditation.
I like that.
Stop
That's exactly because it is.
Yeah. Stop trying. What are you trying to transcend? Like, stop trying to reach that sanitized state of mind where everybody will say when you die that you were perfect and nobody was ever mad at you. And just be present and work with your heart that way. So there's no way to do this perfectly. And this is going to be a bloody and messy time. And hopefully we will make it less bloody and less messy than if we had no mindfulness practice, but it's not going to be clean.
I get what you're saying. I'm going to mute you. Sorry. I would say it's not going to be clean, but it doesn't have to be dirty. It can be transformational, not transcendent. And it all begins with how you hold your mind, not you, capital Y, you. There's no way around it. Each of us has to know how to work with our minds. It doesn't matter what policies we draft and how skillful they are and how intelligent and how rooted in accurate research, if we have hate in our have hate in our hearts. Because the problem, I would say, is not our policies, even though some of them are obviously horrific. It's that we hate each other or don't like each other. So there are many, many wonderful comments and questions. I'm going to go to the next one from Jason. Thank you. And I'm going to cut right to the question, which is, I'm thinking how in the Mahayana we have this emphasis on the bodhisattva path, which has within it this idea of diving into the mess, just like Ethan was talking about, and serving in a way that works towards ending suffering. I'm so happy to hear what both of you are saying, both here and online elsewhere. Can you speak to the balance of taking care of oneself while also serving this need? It's a very important question. I feel like self-care while being fully committed to this struggle is going to be so needed, yet I often find myself exhausted. Do you want to go for that, Ethan? You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So I did write yesterday on my website, which is ethannichtern.com, a 7-point plan for engaged mindfulness in 2017. And the first 3 are about personal practice, and the last 4 are about collective practice or engagement. And I actually put meditation number 2 on the list. Number 1 was be stubborn about taking care of your body. And exercise, eating well, getting rest. Those tend to be the first things that go. And when our body is stressed and overtired, I mean, you can do it for a day or 2, I know, but it really all of us, I think, after, November 8th, after those few days of shock when people weren't sleeping and traumatized and stressed, need to just rest and hydrate and maybe do a little yoga if you can. And the other thing I said is that that meditation, maybe for this year, meditation is always super important to do consistently, especially if you're a meditator or would like to call yourself one. But I think for this year, what I'm tracking is how often I'm able to meditate with other people as the support of community practice as my practice. So, we have the Open Heart Project, the Daily Dharma Gathering. If you're in New York, you can come practice with us at the Shambhala Center. There's lots of great centers all around. Lodro Rinsler has like 17 or 18 mindfuls now opening. There's tons of great places, but I think taking care of the body went first on the list for me, because I think that's the first thing that goes. And if you feel well-fed, well-rested, hydrated, and you moved your body a little bit, the meditation session feels better. It really does. So that's why I put it number 2.
That's awesome. Can you mute yourself, Ethan?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, next question is also awesome. These are great questions, you guys. It's from Sandy, and there may be things that we're missing, so I'll try to go back in comments. We'll try to, after the fact, answer in comments. How do I simultaneously see what is encouraging in human behavior while not allowing the abhorrent in people to take precedence? I tend to become unbalanced and feel totally shut down on the human race in general. Ultimately, I feel as if evolution is the only power that will change the depressing state of human affairs one way or the other. Certainly not a cheerful outlook and hard to relax into. Yeah, I'm sure you're not alone, Sandy, in just scanning the environment and feeling very, very disheartened. Yeah, so here's the only thing that I can suggest, and maybe Ethan has some other things that he can suggest, and I love his idea about practicing with others. That is a very empowering thing to do for everyone, and it's helpful to the others who you're practicing with that you are there practicing too. When I find myself spinning out in the way you describe, I am in my mind doing some kind of calculation very fast. Well, if this person does that, and this country does this, and this thing is happening in this other country, and that happens, and this happens, then it's very clear the direction we're headed in, and I feel powerless to stop it, and people will never change. And you know what? That may be true. All of these things may be true. But it doesn't help me or the world to sit there and think those thoughts. What helps me, at least, is to pull my focus in from the future and the world to myself, my body, like Ethan was talking about, my home, my friends, my loved ones, my partner, and not thinking, oh, well, I have everything okay, because, I do, in the great scheme of things, I'm a very, 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 very fortunate person. Not to take refuge in, oh, all the troubles out there, but to attend to the people and things that need me, that I can do something about. So is there someone in my life who is not well that I could call? Does my house need to be, is there something broken in my house that I can fix? To narrow my focus to my world and take action in that world helps first sort of even me out. I am doing something to be useful. And then when something crosses my radar where I think, oh, I can do something about the situation in the world by having this conversation with you, or giving money to the ACLU, or not anti-Semites, then I will do those things. And I want to believe, because I think it's true, and I want you to know, that these small things accrue. The little things you do in your life, the $10 donations, the moments where you hold good thoughts for our world, the energy that you devote to your practice and to self-care, the kindness that you show to others, most importantly, accrues. And the truth is, that is the only thing we can do, unless you run for president or something like that. But what we can each do right now, without assuming office, is to be kind to each other. And if that sounds like bullshit, well, think again. It isn't. So I don't know if that was useful to you or not, Sandy. Do you want to add anything, Ethan? Are you shaking your head?
I think you said it really well.
Okay, thanks. Okay, let me go to the next question. We have time for one more, so you guys are awesome. Okay, the last question that I'll share with you is from Nessa. This is extremely helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Is there any kind of organized group of Buddhists, or is one forming, for acting skillfully versus Trump and his cohorts? Not just discussing concepts, but actually acting. I know we each have individual actions we can take in our environments, but I would also like to feel part of a group that is taking action without the reactivity or aggression that most political action groups have. Thank you. Over to you, Ethan, for that.
I don't know too much about this, but I do know that there's a lot of communities or groups are forming that are meditation based or Buddhist based. I know there's some groups on Facebook that one can get involved in, both through the Shambhala community. I know there's an Interdependence Project group, but I think there's a lot of actions that can be formed, and a lot of them are going to happen outside of the Buddhist community, because they're happening either in the advocacy realm or in the political realm. I know we're friends with the New York State Attorney General, who's also a mindfulness practitioner. I know he just hosted an event that like 600 people came to, actually, with the creator of House of Cards, that a lot of meditators came to. And so what I would suggest is getting really connected online. I think the other thing I'm seeing is that, and this is actually true, is that like television news has basically abandoned letting us know about anything that matters, actually. I don't know if you all saw this stat, but the major networks spent a total of 32 minutes during the 2016 campaign. All of them combined spent 32 minutes talking about policy issues in the 2016 campaign over the whole year, all of them combined. So like 6 minutes each in a year.
Oh my God.
So we're going to have to curate what's going on in the world and what positive actions we can take. And I think we can use a lot of social media to do that. What I would suggest is get a few mindfulness buddies to go to events with you, or to stay in a loop with, or start a group on your own. Because there's a lot of actions, and these are not going to be actions for the Buddhist community to create, because the actions are already, the organizations that do these actions already exist. And they probably do them better than we could, to be honest. I think what's important is that we practice together and then show up as mindful people at these events. And then people are going to be interested in the practices that we do. So definitely let's all stay connected. And I think a lot of things will be building in 2017. I know a lot of groups already have groups to let people know about what's going on, but the missing piece seems to be mindfulness practitioners showing up at what's already happening together and shifting the energy. So I would suggest not reinventing the wheel on that, but making the wheel run a little bit more smoothly by bringing buddies and fellow practitioners to the events that are of interest to you. And I also think it really has to be whatever local issues you get involved in. I think it should be really up to personal inspiration. You should move with your heart the same way we do in creative practice or anything else. So that's my thought on that.
I totally agree. Buddhism is very interesting in many, many ways, but one of the ways is that when it hits a new shore, it meets with and blends with the dominant culture. It is influenced by the dominant culture, and it influences the dominant culture. So it doesn't become a different culture. So it's very interesting that way. And I say that to emphasize what Ethan was saying about practice mindfulness and then infiltrate and bring mindfulness to the organizations that are doing the things that you think are valuable, and do it right now. But we have to do it right now without freaking out. I'm not saying there aren't things to freak out about, because there are. But when we freak out, it is not helpful. So take action, be decisive, be direct, be uncompromising, and at the same time, be spacious and slow down and look at the people around you for what they might need, to see how you might be able to help them. Ethan mentioned a lot of places where you can go to practice. That's awesome. If you're in the Open Heart Project, that's great. Please keep being in the Open Heart Project. I see the Open Heart Project and Shambhala centers and other Buddhist communities or mindfulness communities as places where you can go to sort of tank up, where you can fuel your tank, where you can just, and then be ready to go out into the world. Some Buddhist lineages, such as ours, Shambhala, actually has suggestions and practices and teachings about what to do once you go out into the world. This is one of the things that sets the Shambhala lineage apart. It is that its focus on engagement, and not just creating personal enlightenment, but societal enlightenment. So very unusual in that particular regard. So it's a few minutes after the hour. I'm going to draw us to a close. I want to thank Ethan from the bottom of my heart for being willing to do this on the last day of the year. And I want to thank you guys for showing up and hanging in, and also for the echo problem. Sorry about that. But we look forward to continuing to practice with you, and hopefully have many more ad hoc gatherings like this where we can come together with people who share our values, not to hide from everyone else, but to gain inspiration and strength to fight the good fight. So if you want to stay in touch with Ethan, you can go to his site, ethannichtern.com. I put it in the comments also. And if you want to read more about his thoughts on engaging skillfully with society, check out his book, The Road Home, the last section especially. And I just thank you, and from my heart offer you strength and prayers and love. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Bye, everyone.
Happy New Year. Trying to stop the broadcast and I can't. Okay, bye.